If you've ever stopped yourself mid-song and thought, is this allowed? Not by the software, but by the genre, by other artists, or by some sort of imaginary audience you haven't even met, then this video is for you. Because most creative paralysis doesn't come from a lack of ideas, it comes from waiting for approval. By the way, I'm Arran. I help musicians grow with clarity and confidence on stage, in practice, and in their creative work. Most of us don't realise how many voices we're carrying around when we create. What would this artist do here? Does this fit the genre? Is this too much or not enough? These aren't stupid questions, but when they're the only questions we have, something subtle happens. We stop listening to the music in front of us and start consulting an invisible committee. I've lost count the number of times I've paused a piece of music and thought, can I put a violin here, or can I add an extra mandolin here? Does that belong in this style? Would people appreciate this? Not because it sounded wrong, but because I was worried it might break some sort of culturally accepted norm. And if you follow that logic long enough, you don't end with a clear decision. You end up with a pastiche of someone else's sound. Learning from other artists is essential, but outsourcing your judgment to them is something else. If every decision is filtered through what would this particular artist do, you slowly disappear from your own work. The music might be competent, but it won't be specific. And specificity is where kind of the emotion lives in a song. So David Bowie talked about this in a way that stayed with me for years on a video I saw. He said, if you feel safe in the area you're working in, you're not working in the right area. Always go a little further into the water than you feel you're capable of being in. Go a little bit out of your depth. And when you don't feel that your feet are quite touching the bottom, you're in about the right place to do something exciting. I love that because he isn't romanticizing discomfort. He's naming it as a signal. That moment where your feet don't quite touch, that's usually when the censor gets loud, telling you can or can't do something. And it's also usually where the work starts to become your own. At some point, I had to simplify the decision-making process because constantly checking your choices against imaginary standards, I just found it exhausting. So I adopted a rule that feels almost too obvious. If it helps the music communicate what I'm trying to say, then it belongs. That's it. Okay, not is it clever, is it fashionable, is it defensible, but does it communicate something real? Does it help the listener feel something? In this context, good doesn't mean impressive, it means effective. If a violin makes the emotion clearer, then it's good. If silence says more than a chord change, it's good. If something feels slightly strange but deeply right, it probably belongs. The audience doesn't experience your hesitation in the studio or in the writing room. They experience the result. There's a quote from the famous producer Rubin that I know some people find controversial. He says, the audience comes last. And on hearing that, it can sound dismissive, like you're ignoring the people you're making the music for, but that's not what he means. What he's pointing at is this. If you try to anticipate the audience while you're making the work, you stop listening to the work itself. You start predicting instead of responding. Ironically, that's when the connection weakens because the music isn't coming from a real place anymore. The audience doesn't want to be managed. They want to be met. Your responsibility isn't to follow the genre. It's to communicate. And the moment you take responsibility for that, your work stops sounding borrowed and it starts sounding like you. If you're stuck waiting for permission, then consider this. Make the choice that serves the emotion. Trust your ears. Let the music reflect you, not the committee in your head. Most of the artists we admire didn't want to be told they were allowed to do what they did. They decided and let the work explain itself. If you want to keep exploring ideas like this about creativity, practice, and making music that actually feels like yours, you're very welcome to subscribe. And if you're looking for deeper guidance, lessons, or a space to develop this kind of thinking further, I've also built a community where musicians can go deeper. You'll find the link below. Thanks for listening and thanks for spending your time with me.